Sometimes there are cases that are so evil and twisted, ones that don't make sense to those of us who are compassionate, loving people with a conscience. But there are monsters walking among us that seem to lack even the slightest bit of humanity. This is one of those stories. It'll leave you asking why and questioning whether you can truly know anyone, because some humans have truly evil minds. Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. And if you've never been here before, I'm Kimbyrleigha. It's nice to finally meet you. Okay, today I have a very fun sponsorship. It's a surprise that I got for John and he doesn't know it yet. And I'm going to surprise him with all of you right now. I'll let you know this much. I created an original song with our sponsor Songfinch as a Father's Day gift to John. It's his first Father's Day. I mean, the baby isn't quite here yet, but he's going to be a dad very soon. So I thought that it was fitting. Okay, so let's go reveal the song to him now. So before we get started with our podcast episode for today, I actually have a surprise for you.
You have a surprise for me?
I know. Yes, I do.
What is it?
It's a gift.
I love gifts.
I know you do. It's a musical gift.
Oh, you got me an instrument?
No.
Oh.
I got you a song.
The gift of music.
Yes.
Cool.
Are you ready to listen?
Yeah.
Okay. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Our first date at Joey's didn't go so well. Turkey baster, cream too heavy. Oh, we slipped on gravy. We get through all hurdles, laughing together every day, living the best life with my best friend. I can't wait for our future. Actually,
I love you. That's cool.
Did you know when
The gravy.
Yeah.
It's Halloween.
Yeah.
I love you. I love you so much. It's funny.
Oh my God. Okay. I was so nervous to do that. And just so you know, I didn't play it all. Obviously, that was just a clip, but it was very meaningful. The lyrics are all inside jokes and memories that we've shared, and he loved it. And this is the best gift to give someone. Songfinch lets you create an original radio quality song inspired by your own life and the people you love. It's completely unique, personal, and it lasts forever. Whether your song is for Father's Day, an upcoming graduation, a wedding, or an anniversary, or even just to show someone that you love and care about them, I'm telling you, it is a great idea. So start your song now to lock in one of Songfinch's top artists. It's super easy to do. Their site was so simple. You are walked through the entire process. You just tell them things like who the song is for, what style you want it in, and then you share personal details and things you'd like to be mentioned in the song, and you get to choose an actual Songfinch musician of your choice. They will write, record, and produce your original song in just 4 to 7 days. Mine was here so fast, I couldn't believe it. Plus, they also have unique add-ons to make the gift even more special. You can get a vinyl record of your song or one-of-a-kind art made from your lyrics. You can even add your song to Spotify for everyone to listen to. This is so much better than the same predictable gifts we always give every year. It's just one of a kind, and I'm now thinking about making one for other people in my life, like my mom and my daughter. And for a limited time, Songfinch is letting all of my viewers like you upload their song to Spotify for free, so that you and the lucky person you gift it to can listen to it anytime, anywhere. Just go to songfinch.com/Kimber and start your song. After your purchase, you'll be prompted to add Spotify streaming for your original song for free, and that is a $50 value. Again, my URL is songfinch.com/Kimber. I'm going to put it up on the screen for you. And thank you so very much to Songfinch for sponsoring today's video. I'd like to jump right into today's case, but today's a special day because in case you missed the intro and you've been here before, I am relaunching a series I started a year or so ago called Evil Minds. John made the intro. I think it came out really good. This series is a different series than my normal videos, but don't worry, it's not taking the place of them. It'll come around every now and then when I find a case that is pure evil. It dives into the mind, actions, and behavior of some of the most frightening, diabolical, and just plain evil murderers or individuals that walk among us. These are the type of cases that make your jaw drop and question everything you thought you knew about human beings. In today's case, we're going to be taking a look behind the curtain at one of those people. His name is Gable Tostee, and what he was involved in may or may not be familiar to you. The victim, Warriena Wright, and her terrifying last day on this earth may have stuck with you if you caught it in the media. She plummeted to her death from the balcony of a 14th floor apartment in Australia. And the owner of that apartment that she fell from was Gable Tostee. They met on Tinder just hours before her death. And it's been 10 years since that night in 2014. But even now, the details surrounding this case remain a topic of intrigue and contention. There has been a lot of debate about the outcome of the trial, but much less about the person Gable is and was before that fatal date night. Our deep dive today will not only recap the events of that fateful night, but also examine the dynamics that shaped Gable's childhood and his early adult years before the incident. We'll look into his habits, his extensive online presence, the way he interacted with women, and the significant yet often overlooked details that paint a fuller picture of his character and the evil that lies within. Let me start out by telling you about Gable Tostee's background. He was born in 1986 on the Gold Coast of Australia. He's the oldest son of Gray and Helene Tostee, and he was named after Clark Gable from Gone with the Wind. And I just want to say, in case I mispronounce anything, be gentle with me. I'm 36 weeks pregnant right now. I've got pregnancy brain, tired. So please forgive me and also just correct me nicely in the comments. I'm always here to learn. From the start, Gable's life was one of privilege and opportunity. He was raised in a gated community on the Gold Coast in the canal regions where most houses have access to things like a private jetty with expensive boats and watercraft. He was educated at a prestigious private school that cost about $15,000 a year, and he participated in things like golf and table tennis tournaments. During his school years, Gable was regarded as friendly, but he was also known as quiet and introverted. He didn't really have a close circle of good friends, but he wasn't exactly a loner either. He was more like one of those people who just kind of floated through school without anyone really noticing them. That is, until they had a reason to look back and remember them. When Gable finished school, his dad gave him a job at his successful carpet laying company. Good old-fashioned nepotism. He'd want for nothing and was given whatever his heart desires. It was around the same time that Gable began posting about his life online, and he would boast that he was getting paid $70 an hour, Australian dollars, and working just about 20 to maybe 30 hours a week. It's one of those scenarios where most of us would have to hold back from thinking or even saying, it must be nice. And it is nice. His parents worked hard, and if they wanted to spoil him or set him up for success, is it such a bad thing? Maybe not. But what I've always been taught, it's what you do with what you've been given that matters. And Gable was definitely doing the bare minimum, and he was the type that bragged and held himself in a much higher regard, just reveling in the good life without having to do much. And it was really good money for a teenager, but clearly not enough for someone like him. Because when Gable was only 17, he decided to become an entrepreneur. It sounds good, but not a legal one. He set up a forgery scam where he was selling fake IDs to underage teens who wanted to join in on what's called Schoolies Week. Now, you may not be familiar with this if you're here in the US, but this is an annual celebration in Australia where high school graduates are referred to as schoolies, and they participate in various events and activities to kind of highlight the end of their high school education. It's a week-long event that typically occurs in late November or so, and it's really popular in the coastal beach areas, particularly the Gold Coast, for a whole week. Pubs and clubs and all these groups of teenagers will have these large gatherings, parties, and community events. It is seen as a rite of passage for many young Australians to celebrate their transition into adulthood. But given that the drinking age in Australia is 18, it also coincides with many kids being able to legally drink. But Schoolies has been criticized for a very long time for its excessive party atmosphere, which of course can lead to risky behaviors, including things like binge drinking, using drugs, and even acts of violence. But interestingly, that seems to be exactly what appeals to those who attend. They're 18, they're away from their parents, and they're ready to party. But for those kids who haven't quite turned 18 yet and don't want to miss out on the fun, that's where Gable came in. He recruited a school friend, and they set up this scheme where if you gave him $60 and a passport photo, he would give you a passable fake ID. Gable would even provide a guarantee that if the ID didn't work or if it was confiscated by a security guard or a bouncer at a club, he would replace it for free. And it seems like quite a deal. Over the course of a year, Gable and his friends were said to have raked in more than $30,000, although there are some reports that say it was closer to maybe $10,000. But after the first season, Gable apparently got bored with this endeavor, and he decided he didn't want to do it anymore. So he sold his share of the business to his friend and another associate for just $300 each. And you know that Gable didn't need the money. But just a few months later, the Australian Federal Police became aware of the scam. They raided Gable and his former business partners' homes, and they found clear evidence that Gable was the mastermind behind the entire scam. But the raid uncovered something much more concerning. On Gable's computer was a reproduction of an Australia $50 note, and it was considered to be almost identical to the real thing, one of the best reproductions the agents on the case had ever seen. And when you have the means, you can get your hands on the technology and access to ways of creating things like this. And Gable was afforded that access. He was charged with forgery, but it took 2 years before the matter even made it to court. In the meanwhile, he was ordered to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. This was to establish if maybe he had some kind of condition that might have played a part in his crime. The doctor who examined him found, and this was interesting to me and I didn't quite understand it, but that Gable was partially disabled. Those were the psychiatrist's indications, saying that he had, quote, severe, unrelieved, obsessive-compulsive disorder, end quote. That's what it was called. And he was an emotionally estranged person with whom it was impossible to establish clear-cut rapport. Interesting report. I want to point out that I do feel for anyone that's dealing with mental health concerns, and I don't believe we should be stigmatized for them or that those individuals should be put into a certain category. Because again, I believe it's how you deal with what you're going through, whether they ask and get the help they need. But mental health is also not an excuse for choosing bad behaviors either. There were also some reports that said that he might have been on the autism spectrum. When the case eventually made it to the courts, Gable and his co-accused pleaded guilty to the charges of forgery, possessing counterfeit instruments, and making counterfeit money, and they were sentenced to probation and 200 hours of community service. Because of this ruling, no conviction was recorded against their records, though. And the judge commented that Gable should probably try to focus his intellectual talent, if that's what he wanted to call it, on more constructive endeavors. And I agree. And it was said that because of maybe some of his autism and other developmental conditions found in this medical report, the judge also stated that he was at a huge disadvantage in the normal social world. So keep that in mind. By the time Gable was let off the hook for fraud, he was 20 years old. The people he knew from high school had moved on with their lives. They were in college, in their careers, they had relationships, while Gable was still living with his parents and working for his dad. The only network he did seem to have was on an online bodybuilding forum where he posted all the time. And these weren't real friends, of course not. They were just random strangers on the internet who only got a glimpse into who Gable really was from what he decided to post. Gable had been a member of the forum since back in 2004. That was a year before his fake ID business was up and running. In his profile, he went by the username GT, which are his initials, and he described himself as an Australian, 6'2", 198 pounds. When he first joined, he would post about workout routines and ask for advice on how to eat to gain muscle or to slim down. But in January of 2010, the tone of his post changed dramatically when he wrote, a long post asking for advice on how to make friends. And you know what? I feel for him here. It's hard for me to make friends because I'm lonely doing this job where I sit and talk into a camera all day. And when I'm not filming, I'm spending hours researching and writing and looking into a computer screen. So it doesn't give me much opportunities to meet people unless I meet them online, which there's nothing wrong with that in and of itself. But let me tell you what Gable posted. It went something like this. He said, quote, "I'm in a bit of a situation. About 5 years ago, some shit went down. I won't get into it. And I had to cut off contact with literally all of my friends and basically disappear. Many of them were involved. Said shit that happened has sort of blown over now. But I never really reestablished contact with anyone I used to know until the other week when I bumped into an old best mate at a restaurant. When I asked him what other friends were up to, I realized how much I missed out on socially over the last half of a decade," end quote. Gable wrote about how he worked for his dad as a carpet layer, so he didn't have many colleagues. He didn't go to university, and he never played something like a sport, and he even referred to himself as a hermit several times. And then he asked for feedback from the other users about how he could maybe start making new friends or reconnecting with people he knew back from school. The unusual topic of this post definitely attracted plenty of comments. Gable replied to every single one. He thanked the other users for their advice and asked more questions about how to do what they suggested. He wrote, quote, "It's difficult to make actual friends without knowing people already, since I eventually have to reveal the fact that I'm a hermit," end quote. The day after his original post, Gable updated it to say that he had just set up a Facebook profile for the very first time. He stated that he had sent friend requests to everyone he could think of, and he asked people in the forum how long they thought it would take for people to respond. And he wrote, quote, "This is pretty daunting. I feel as though I've been pushed aside or can't relate, even sort of with my old best mates," end quote. A few days later, he came back again to the forum, and he said that he'd been spending more time with that friend from back in high school that he'd recently reconnected with. He went on to share they went out together and they tried to pick up some women, which was something that Gable had never done before because, well, he had social awkwardness. And this is where Gable's tone in this forum changes from trying to make friends and get out more to be completely laser focused on merely sleeping with women. I'm not sure if this friend of his was the reasons that his goals shifted, or if it was the fact that he never experienced certain things when it came to the opposite sex. But what followed were several posts from Gable asking for advice on how to guarantee that any woman he wanted would sleep with him. That's much different than asking about how to make friends. But you have to remember, this is a bodybuilding forum. I've been in many of them before. It's usually male-dominated, and they tend to talk about women. And it's really not that uncommon for men to want to find women to have a good time with. So he posted about a woman who gave her number to him, and he said, quote, "She seemed pretty into me. She wanted to meet again. Hugged her goodbye outside and said I'd call her. She was on holiday and leaving today. I called earlier, but it was an answering machine. So I texted her and I didn't get a reply. Should I call her again? Perhaps off a private number," end quote. Now, he really does seem pretty clueless, but also like he's trying to almost use tactics, like asking, should I disguise my number? And the users told him that if this woman wanted him, she would call. And then Gable replied, quote, "Do you think it's possible to close the deal in the same night with any girl if you're good enough?" End quote. And when I was reading these posts, I thought, wow, he sounds like a guy that's just reached puberty and is laughing with his friends about girls and want to engage in maybe his first kiss. And you know what? That wasn't that far off. He was just older at the time. So that's why I think, to me, it might come off a bit shallow and fake. But a week later, he posted again. There's going to be a lot of these little posts in here that I share with you. And he said, quote, "On Friday, I met this chick who was here on holiday. Started talking to her at the bar. We danced, kissed, and kept in mind at this point to be more aggressive. I can't remember exactly what I said, but I was much more direct. Ended up rooting her in the back of my car, then taking her back to my place to root her in bed, end quote. Now, I didn't know what rooting meant, but of course, I took a wild guess at slang for intercourse. So he apparently, according to him, achieved his goal. He slept with someone. After that night, he posted all the time, very frequently, about the women he tried and failed to sleep with. Sometimes he rated their looks on a scale from 1 to 10. Classy. Other times he asked whether it was ethical to keep buying a girl drinks to make her sleep with him. What do you think about that? I'm, of course, definitely interested in your thoughts. In the 3 weeks since he posted about rooting the girl in the back of his car, he hadn't been able to convince anyone else to have sex with him. That's what he posted about. He said, quote, "Is it normal to get screwed around like this? In my mind, I just want to get the second one down so that I'll know it wasn't just a fluke," end quote. So he's wondering, was that just a one-time thing? Did I just get lucky? Or can I do it again? Another month passed with several more similar posts. By February, his post came across as honestly increasingly desperate, and people could tell. He shared that he'd gone up to at least 20 girls in one night, but all of them had rejected him except for one that did end up giving her phone number to him. But then she never replied to any of his messages. These posts give us a very unique insight into the mind of a person who's becoming increasingly hostile towards women and impatient when it comes to not getting what he wants. Did you detect the change in tone from his earlier posts? Remember, in those, he was questioning his own self-worth and how maybe he could be more attractive towards women. Gable's post reflected a typical concern for social acceptance. We want to be accepted, and even self-improvement, which is common, especially in an online forum like this. However, as time progressed, he continued to be rejected, and then there's more of this emphasis on asserting dominance and control in his interactions. He began blaming external factors, particularly the women, for his frustrations and his failures. And that's kind of scary. No one has to do anything that they don't want to, and giving them free drinks all night long doesn't equal consent if they're too intoxicated to understand what they're doing and what they're agreeing to. When Gable's aggressive approach didn't seem to make a difference, he decided to try a different one. Rather than just trying to sleep with them, he would give the women what he kind of referred to as the boyfriend experience. Except Gable didn't know anything about having a girlfriend because he had never had one. But it's clear from his next few posts that he was feeling conflicted between just sleeping with someone or maybe seeking more of a human connection, which he had been missing from his life for so long. So I thought maybe this was him reevaluating his more, I guess I could call it skanky approach, or was he just trying to use another tactic? Well, this is what his next post said, quote, "One of them had a boyfriend. She was dancing, grinding with me, and initially refused to kiss me, although I could tell she wanted to. But with a bit of work, I finally got a kiss and her number. I realized something that never even occurred to me. But all the girls I've met and gotten to know over the past few weeks, I've actually cared about. I'm still in touch with a girl I banged before, even though now she's overseas. Regardless of whether I get laid, I'm still going to really miss this girl, and I don't really know what to think. In any case, I don't believe in monogamous relationships, but I never thought I would give a damn about any of these girls until I realized that I may never see one of them again. None of this will stop me from trying to meet new girls," end quote. Interesting post, but talking about the girl that he knew had a boyfriend sounds like a conquest to me. When he says he actually cared about these women, I can't help but think that he's unable to understand what caring really is. He seems to care about one thing, himself and his own pleasure. At this point, Gable could have gone one of two ways: attempt to make meaningful connections with people, or double down on the aggressive and dominating approach. And he chose the second option. Of course he did. It's easier. It took a couple more weeks for Gable to discover a new technique, which was apparently much more successful for him. He would approach a girl that had a friend, and he would say, "I think your friend is checking me out." That's so cheesy. I'm sad for these poor women who fell for that kind of pickup line. But most of the time, the friend would at the very least take him over to her friend, the girl, that supposedly was checking him out, which seemed to at least break the ice more effectively. And then Gable was just off and running with all of his other tactics. Night after night, he would refine his approach. And after a few weeks, he came back to the forum to post about his successes or his failures. He then started adding pictures and ratings of the girls on a scale from 1 to 10. But this time, it wasn't just their looks that he was assessing. It was how they were in bed. Yes. One girl was given an 8 and another was given a 5.5. And he called that girl a huge mistake and wrote that he should have spent more time on someone hotter instead. It comes off so shallow. But I'm not surprised there are people out there that are thinking this way. I mean, to each their own. It's just such a one-way street because if a woman was talking like this, surely she would be referred to as a whore, slut, etc. But it does seem more acceptable for a man to speak this way. People will refer to it as like sowing their oats or even make excuses. And don't get me wrong, it's a choice for a woman or a man. But he goes on to say, quote, "Anyway, that's the 5th root for this year and the 4th within a week. My mates are amazed and actually asking me for tips. Who would have thought?" End quote. And over the next few months, users began asking Gable to give them advice so they could follow in his footsteps. In another example of one of his conquests, he posted this, quote, "I saw this hot, smallish girl, 8 out of 10, with an amazing body, dancing on her own, surrounded by like 5 guys. All I did was give her a glance and then a come here gesture with my hand, and I was in. She was great in bed." End quote. By the end of 2010, Gable boasted that he had slept with 50 girls that year. He posted to users on the forum that they could ask him anything about his experiences, and he would answer honestly. He was asked, "How do you keep track of all these women?" And he responded that he kept a log of names with each of the girls' rating. And then he continued with tips on how to make yourself look good and make sure that the man initiates the contact. He said, "Don't wait for the women to come to you." When a user asked what his goal was for the following year, he said he didn't really have a goal. He just wanted to prove to himself that he could do this after he had only slept with one girl until he was 23 years old. His plan was just to keep having fun. He continued in March the same way through 2011, except now he lived in a brand new apartment that his parents got for him. It was right off the main strip at Surfer's Paradise. It was the perfect spot to be able to enjoy his hobby of picking up women to sleep with on a nightly basis. And enjoy he was. Gable would go out every night and then go on the forum the next day and talk about his most recent sexual experiences. Sometimes he would share about how he had no memory of who he slept with because he was drinking so much. He would wake up to find used condoms in his room or a pair of girls' underwear with no recollection of who they belonged to. Outside of drinking, working, and partying, Gable wrote that he spent his time watching Jersey Shore and Nip Tuck to get ideas on how to talk to women. Wow, those are great references. At this point, he was still working on his father's carpet laying business, but his online profile changed. It stated that he was a property developer and investor. That's interesting. Maybe he wanted to make himself look better to all of his bodybuilding online friends. Like he wasn't just mooching off of his parents and using their money to sleep with as many girls as possible. But in mid-2012, Gable posted that he achieved a new milestone in his sexual conquests. 100 women. Bravo. Except this time, he didn't seem so upbeat about this realization, and that was interesting. He said, quote, "Ask a guy who just reached 100 girls slept with and is kind of depressed, anything, go." End quote. So he's asking, ask me anything, but I'm depressed, even though I achieved this milestone. But I wonder what he thought was going to happen for him. Many of us know that sleeping with someone is usually pretty meaningless without a connection. But in reply to some of these comments on the post, he stated that he'd never been in a relationship, and he had a reason for that. He posted this, quote, "Anyone else have this thing where they get bored of sleeping with one single girl? No matter how hot she is or how much I have feelings with her, nothing satisfies me more than hitting something new. It's like watching a movie. No matter how good it is, I'd rather watch one I haven't seen than the same one over and over," end quote. And that's a little sad, but I can imagine there are a lot of people who feel that way. And it may have a lot to do with his parents, always giving him whatever he wanted and not having to work for it. You don't have the same sense of pride or care for things that are just handed to you without much effort. He doesn't seem to know how to be content. But maybe he just needs to explore more. I don't know. He wanted to keep hooking up with more women, but he also seemed to want to change how he felt about himself. He wrote, quote, "This is one of the things that gets me down. I imagine myself being different, but I'm not really sure I am. I've always had very low self-esteem. One of the main reasons I try to sleep with different girls as often as possible is to improve my own confidence," end quote. In that same post, he provided more insight into the level of record keeping that he was maintaining. It wasn't just a diary with a list of names anymore. It had evolved. It was now videos and voice recordings too. So now it moved to an even more permanent method of record keeping. And he went on to say, quote, "I'm somewhat obsessed with recording everything. I have motion detection cameras in my home. I have call recordings on my phone. And sometimes I even leave my phone on record in my pocket for nights out in case I forget what happens," end quote. It's important to note that nowhere have I found any evidence to indicate that Gable told these women that he was sleeping with that they were being recorded, either on video or voice recording. And that is a huge invasion of privacy. During the 2 years Gable had been posting on the bodybuilding forum, he'd never shown his face before. But after his post about allegedly sleeping with 100 women, I think people wanted to see what he looked like. So he finally uploaded a photo, and he even asked the users to rate his appearance. He posted a selfie in a low-necked white t-shirt. His hair is kind of swept across his forehead, and I'm posting it here for those watching and not just listening. And objectively speaking, he's what I would refer to as the typical clean-cut style guy. Nothing too special about him, but overall I think he would be the type of guy that a majority of women would find outwardly attractive. But if there's no personality to match, he's pretty basic. He asked, so I'm giving my 2 cents as well. But the users on the site were way harsher than I was. They rated him a 4 out of 10, and someone even told him that he looked cross-eyed. Gable didn't really seem to mind the negative feedback. He didn't take it too seriously because after all, in his mind, he's living the life that many of these guys dreamed of. A nice place to live paid by mommy and daddy, and one of the best nightlife and holiday spots in Australia. Going out every night, bringing home a different woman. In Gable's mind, he truly was living the dream. But what he didn't share on this forum was that his nightly prowling wasn't going down as well for the locals as it was for his online admirers. Gable had actually developed a reputation at many of the bars around his apartment, and not in a good way. There had been complaints from countless female patrons that Gable would approach them, and even when they turned him down, he would continue to harass them and bother him. He became known as a serial pest, and he was barred from several establishments. The owner of one nightclub even commented that he was creepy, explaining that Gable had been there all the time and everyone knew who he was. And even after he was banned, he would come on nights when a different bouncer that didn't know him was there and he would try to get back in. And Gable's bad behavior wasn't contained behind closed doors. He had also been spoken to by police for public intoxication. And in one incident, he managed to talk his way out of a fine. But later, he went for a drive with 2 girls and he was pulled over by the police. They did a breathalyzer test, and they found that he was over the legal drinking limit. A few weeks after this, he was issued a citation for public nuisance and given a fine of $1,000 because he gave the middle finger to a police officer. And in another incident, he hailed a tuk-tuk, and this is like a little golf cart-looking mode of public transportation, but he ran off without paying after his ride. The driver notified the police, who found Gable inside of a convenience store, And when they asked him to step outside and answer some questions, he told them to F off. The officers did manage to get Gable into the back of a police car, but they couldn't even close the door because he was kicking with his legs. When they tried to remove him and then reposition him in the vehicle, he kicked the officers. So in the end, they had to resort to pepper spraying him, and they charged him with public nuisance and obstructing police. The incident signaled an increasingly reckless side to Gable's behavior. But even with the fines, he was still going out every night and drinking, except his nightly escapades now carried a heightened sense of unpredictability, and that is scary. And his volatile behavior was only going to get worse with the innovation of good old Tinder. At first, Gable was a bit tentative about this new dating app. He posted to the forum asking if this whole thing was even real and if anyone had actually met any girls through it. But it didn't take much to convince him to give this new technology a try, and before long, it was his preferred method of finding women to hook up with. He now had access to plenty of women who were looking to hook up while they were on holiday in the town, all from the comfort of his own apartment. And because he was banned from many of his favorite hunting grounds, it couldn't have come at a better time for him. Just like during his clubbing days, Gable would post about his new experiences in the forum. When other users began posting screenshots of their Tinder conversations and seeking ratings on how successful they were, Gable joined in on the fun and posted many screenshots of his own. I have seen plenty. But it didn't take long for Gable to become frustrated with Tinder, because it turns out he wasn't having as much luck as he thought he would. He had envisioned that this app would give him easy access to women who would just throw themselves at him. But remember, he's kind of a dime a dozen, not gonna lie. I mean, think about it. There's so many people out there. And so instead, he found himself struggling to convince women to take their connections off the app into real life. Yeah, like I said, based on looks alone, he's probably not going to have that much luck unless he can back it up with some substance. And from what I've gathered, he was lacking. In September 2013, he was frustrated. He posted saying this, quote, "F'd about 8 chicks off this app last month, but just had a big fail streak over the weekend. Met up with 4 different chicks, 3 who came over to my apartment for drinks, but were totally frigid. I'm sick of time and money wasting bitches. Every girl has Tinder now, and none of them are DTF anymore," end quote. I think you know what DTF is? Down to F? Yeah. I feel like he's a shark in blood-infested water just looking for his next kill. It's kind of creepy. And sure, there are definitely women who are looking to just hook up, but let's be real, a lot of women do want to find a real connection. And it wasn't happening for Gable, so the posts kept coming. There was one that said, quote, "Met another chick from Tinder tonight who drove 45 minutes to stay in my place and have drinks. We started kissing for several minutes, and then I go to unzip her dress, and she pulls the whole, 'Oh, I'm not going to do this.' So I brush it off, as per usual, and keep trying to hook up. But she's 100% serious, says she should leave, and then gets up and goes," end quote. Yeah, Gable, that's her right. It's her body. And I know some may say, well, she was on Tinder. She decided to go out with him. She decided to go to his place. She did this. She did that. But ultimately, we have the right to say no when we're not comfortable when things get past our boundaries. And Gable doesn't like to be told no. There was another post that had a similar tone. He wrote, quote, "This is bullshit. I had a girl from Tinder stay at my place Wednesday night. I was running my hands over her body, but she was totally unresponsive. Yet for some reason, she was perfectly okay to stay in my bed for the night," end quote. Then he literally described how he put her hand on his private area and she pulled it away. In February 2014, he posted about a match who left him in the chat without sleeping with him. She accused him of only wanting one thing, to which he, of course, tried to say that's not it. And he replied, "No, I like you. I think you're cool. I want to see you again. Believe me." But she ignored this message, as well as 3 more that he sent her. The final message she sent him read, quote, "The only thing I'm faulting you for is repeatedly grabbing at my vagina and putting my hand on your cock after I said, I'm not like that," end quote. And to be fair, a woman can be conned. Anyone can be conned, but a woman can be conned into thinking, hey, this seems like a cool nice guy. Let me go on a date with him, get to know him. And boom, he pulls the things that Gable has, and it's a huge turnoff. Gable expected every woman who went out with him to sleep with him. There wasn't any other goal in his mind. There was no truly getting to know any of these women, and we know that from having this behind-the-scenes look at his goals as he's posting them in the forum. He would even make remarks in the forum that a girl shouldn't come over to his house if she didn't want to have sex with him. But now, people on the bodybuilding site were actually disagreeing with him. They said that he's coming across desperate, insecure, and forceful. One person wrote, quote, "You complain that all women are whores. You complain even more when walking into your bedroom isn't a contract for sex," end quote. The criticism from his online community didn't put Gable off, though. He was on Tinder all day, every day, seeking one thing but selling another, like I said, essentially conning these women. He would tell them what he thought they wanted to hear now, that he was a solid guy looking for a relationship, but when they got back to his apartment, all he tried to do was sleep with them. And then once he got what he wanted, or in the case where they didn't put out, he would just send them on their way, and that was it. He never truly cared about seeing them again. He was on to the next. It's like he had this insatiable appetite. If anything, Tinder made Gable feel more emboldened than ever before, and the risky edge to his behavior continued to escalate. He was relentless in his search to find women to sleep with him. He interacted with more than 250 women in less than a year on Tinder, and many of them were at the same time. Gable's drive to sleep with as many women as possible coincided with his propensity for drinking. He often drank to the point of blacking out and would tell the online community that it actually eased his social anxiety. And there's a reason why people call alcohol liquid courage, but in the end, it's just a mask or a Band-Aid. It doesn't truly help you be less socially awkward. You just don't notice it because you're under the influence. But his escalating drinking habits and pursuit of fleeting sexual encounters led Gable to develop a superficial network of acquaintances that were all centered around the nightlife and partying. These connections offered him a sense of belonging, but they lacked that genuine emotional depth that he once claimed he really wanted. It was within this context that he found himself more involved with friends who shared his taste for late nights out and heavy drinking, all of which culminated in a concerning and reckless incident on July 27th in 2014. That afternoon, Gable met up with two of his party guy friends at what's called Splendor in the Grass. It's a music festival which is held in the picturesque Byron Bay. This festival is like Australia's Coachella. When the stage is shut down in the early morning hours, Gable went to sleep off the alcohol in his father's car, which he drove to the event. He was then woken up by his drunk friends. They were knocking and banging on all of his windows. They convinced him to drive back to Surfer's Paradise so that they could get into the clubs before this 3 a.m. lockout. In many parts of Australia, the bars close their doors at 3 a.m., and anyone who's already inside the bar can stay until they officially close. But anyone that's outside can't enter the venue after the lockout. So now the pressure was on for this group to get back to the city as quickly as possible, or their night would officially be over. And none of them wanted that. So Gable was speeding, and he was clocked at going about 93 miles an hour along the Pacific Highway. Police officers attempted to pull him over, but instead of stopping, he increased his speed to over 121 miles an hour in an attempt to evade them. Wow, that is insanely fast. Even as police were chasing him, he didn't slow down. They had to put road spikes out on the highway. And even despite these spikes ripping Gable's tires to shreds, this man continued to drive until the vehicle's metal rims lost traction with the road and sparks were flying from the metal. When the vehicle eventually came to a stop, again, a breathalyzer found that Gable had a blood alcohol level 4 times the legal drinking limit. Gable was then arrested and charged with drunk driving. Despite facing serious charges, Gable was released on bail, and he immediately jumped right back on Tinder. There wasn't a minute to waste in his mind. On the 1st of August, 2014, he swiped right on a profile of a pretty girl named Warriena Wright. Now it's time I focus on Warriena, and rightfully so, because without what happened to her, Gable's name would probably have remained unknown. Warriena was born on the 20th of May in 1988 in the Philippines to her mother, Merzabeth, who went by Beth, and her father, Warren. She had a younger sister, Mareza, who went by Reza, and Warriena was called Ree to those close to her. And when the girls were young, the family moved to Wellington, New Zealand. Warriena was a good student, particularly when it came to English and technology, and friends remember her as the maternal type. She enjoyed Hello Kitty, road trips, and creating art through photography and drawing. She had a strong sense of right and wrong and believed in fairness and equality for everyone, no matter what their background was. After finishing school, Warriena worked at a bank call center in Wellington City. She lived with her younger sister at a flat in Lower Hutt. On the weekends, the two of them would invite a few friends over and they would play video games like Final Fantasy or watch Dragon Ball Z. She also loved animals. And in 2013, she actually wrote to the New Zealand Parliament and argued against animal testing and hoped it would become outlawed in an upcoming bill. She said that when she saw an animal in pain, it was the same feeling she got when she saw a child in pain. Warriena was about 125 pounds and 5'2" tall. She was very petite. And despite being very classically beautiful with big brown eyes, defined cheekbones, and shiny long dark hair, she struggled with low self-esteem. She constantly questioned whether she was pretty enough or smart enough to attract the kind of guy who she really wanted to settle down with. She did have a couple serious boyfriends, but they just didn't work out. And Warriena was worried about her future, especially when she started watching all of her friends get into long-term relationships and settle down and get married and have children. And I think a lot of us have been there, so I truly do feel for her. On the 29th of July in 2014, Warriena flew to Australia to attend a friend Haley Scott's wedding on the Gold Coast. They'd met at one of Warriena's first photography jobs for children's birthday parties called Pixie Photo, and they had stayed in touch. She had been saving for months to attend this wedding, and she was looking forward to not only the celebrations, but also to her own vacation. She wanted to go shopping and see old friends and party while she was on this 2-week holiday. This was actually the longest she would ever be away from her younger sister. She would always say that they would be together forever, and she would joke that they would live together with 30 dogs. 3 days later, on the 1st of August, Warriena was on Tinder, seeing if maybe she could match with someone while she was there, and that is when she swiped right on Gable Tostee. His profile caught her eye. He was tan and looking seductively at the camera. And Warriena had actually just gone through a breakup recently. So Gable offered exactly the kind of holiday fling she was looking for. Just something fun and a casual connection that could get her mind off of the hardships she was facing in the love department. She was due to leave Australia on the 11th of August. And what better way to top off her holiday than with a night of carefree fun that Gable's bio promised? What could go wrong? Everything. When 26-year-old Warriena and 28-year-old Gable matched, he sent her the first message, which read, "You look delicious. I want to do dirty things to you." What she didn't know and was later discovered is that he would use the same line with so many of his Tinder matches, and often it failed. But with Warriena, it was an exception. She had limited time there, so perhaps the bar was set pretty low. And she did think he was attractive, and he sounded like a good time. She even asked him if that line actually worked, and he responded with, "Haha, not trying to make anything work. I'm just saying. You got a problem with that?" And he added a smiley face with like the tongue sticking out. And Warriena responded with, "LOL, fair enough. I was just asking," and added the same smiley face back to him. Then Gable asked, "So, you're down with that then? Can you be a freak in the sheets? Cletus?" And in parentheses, it says Miss Wright's Tinder alias. I think she was going by the name Cletus as her username. But she did respond with, "It depends." And Gable asked what it depended on. And Warriena stated it depended on what she had to drink. So Gable suggested, "Let's get drunk together. I'm a porn star after a few drinks." Classy. Like I said, if it weren't for the fact that she had a very limited time to have fun there, this may not have worked on her. But the bar was low, and Gable looked and sounded like some fun. So on Thursday, the 7th of August at 8:45 p.m., Warriena and Gable were captured on CCTV cameras as they met for the very first time. Gable has suggested meeting at a local spot on Gable Avenue, which is in Surfer's Paradise, and it's in the main entertainment strip. On this video, you can see Warriena walking up. She's kind of looking around. She's on her cell phone, probably texting him, trying to find out if he was on the way because she didn't see him. At another point, she sat down on the bench, still waiting, and then you can see him walking up. He's looking around. They kind of pass each other, and then Warriena kind of probably yells out to him, and he turns around, and they realize they finally met up. And then they kind of give each other an awkward hug. At 8:48 p.m., they walked into a bar which advertised a large beer garden, but really it was completely empty. And they were only inside for a couple minutes before leaving that venue and walking down the street together. They walked into BWS Bottle Shop, it's a liquor store, and Warriena puts a 6-pack of beer on the counter, and Gable paid for it. Then they walked a very short distance to the Avalon Apartments. This is where Gable lived. At 8:58 p.m., less than 15 minutes after meeting in person for the very first time, Gable and Warriena catch the elevator up to the 14th floor. Gable's apartment, it is called a luxury apartment, but it's nothing grand. I mean, the view is wonderful, but it's a 1-bedroom with a modest living area and a balcony with a view of the beach below. His sense of style could be described as minimalist and masculine, kind of like the typical bachelor pad. He had a glass dining table near the kitchen with 4 beige high-back chairs. There was a white leather couch positioned across from a large TV, and there was a glass coffee table with a bowl filled with small white stones and a black chair next to the couch. On his balcony, which wasn't that big, there was actually a tanning bed on one side. Yes, there was. He lives on the beach, yet he has a tanning bed. And there was a small collection of exercise weights. In his bedroom, he had a matching white leather bed with black sheets, and I noticed a really dirty pillow without a pillowcase. You know, those ones where the sweat and the dirt and the saliva and buildup is underneath, and it turns kind of like a shade of orange or yellow. That's exactly what I mean. I'm showing it in the video. Gable and Warriena's movements once inside the apartment were actually documented because they took several photos of each other and together. They drank beer, they shared a few laughs, and they did end up sleeping together in his bed. They had intercourse. It seems like the kind of night that Gable would brag about in the forum as a win. Then they took some selfies on the balcony, where Warriena can be seen laughing and making the peace sign with her hand. But if you look closely, she also comes off as kind of sad. I don't know, her face in some of these photos just got me thinking. But at some point that evening, she posted a selfie of the pair of them on her Facebook profile, and she even texted her sister, and she said that she met the Australian Sam Winchester. And for those who don't know, Sam Winchester is a character from the TV show Supernatural, which was one of Warriena's favorite shows. So her sister just replied with a thumbs up and she went to bed. But that was the last time that the sisters would ever communicate. A short time after that text, at 12:56 a.m., Gable took out his Sony Xperia phone and began recording everything that happened. This recording was an audio recording. Remember, he said he sometimes does that? And this recording lasted 3 hours and 19 minutes. I do have the entire recording from that night. However, because of the fact they were listening to music, I cannot play it in its entirety because I will get a copyright strike. However, there is plenty of this recording to play for you when the music stops. So I will be playing that portion. Otherwise, I will tell you what is said. Remember, he liked to record his sexcapades, as I like to call them, so that he could recall what happened in case he blacked out, so he could report back to the forum and keep track of what worked when he did get to go all the way with someone. The recording starts with Gable and Warriena drinking some homemade moonshine together, which Gable made himself and is still in his kitchen. He's telling her to come and chill and have a drink, adding that everything on him is good looking. And within 5 minutes after the first drink, Warriena tells him that she's psycho drunk.
Psycho drunk.
And given her size and the fact that she was not a heavy drinker, it's no surprise that the alcohol had such a rapid and severe effect on her. I don't know if you've ever had moonshine. Let me know in the comments. But it is homemade, and that can actually be a very dangerous process, but it can be up to 120 proof. And drinking it straight isn't even recommended. For example, vodka on average is 40 to 80 proof. So there you go. They've already shared a 6-pack of beer. Don't know how many each of them had, but now they're taking shots of straight moonshine. And Warriena was clearly intoxicated to a high level. That is what she meant by psycho drunk. But Gable either doesn't hear her or doesn't care or take her seriously, because several minutes later, he's pouring at least 3 more glasses back to back. Wow, you can hear it. And as the recording goes on, their conversation becomes incoherent and rambling. Of course it does. They're talking about all kinds of things. And at one point, he grossly, in my opinion, threatens to make her come again. I'm guessing referring to sex. Then the conversation goes in an odd direction where they're giving their opinions on death. And Warriena mentions that she knows Gable wants to kill her because he told her so. However, she's referencing smoking, and we don't have the complete context of this. Perhaps she doesn't smoke, and he was suggesting that she should that night, and it implied he wanted her to die because she could get cancer. I am not sure. I'm just speculating here. But then they talk about galaxies, traveling, and religion, to which Gable tells her he doesn't think there's anything after death. He literally says, quote, "You die, and that is it. Throw me off the balcony, and that is it. Boom," end quote. Very eerie because of what happens later. Now, this audio recording also captures them playing around with those rocks. These are like really small rocks. I'm going to show them on the screen if you're watching. And they're sitting on this little plate on the coffee table just as a decoration. It seems as though she had picked some of them up, and he says not to touch them. And he even makes the comment like, "You love them rocks." And they seem to be play fighting with each other, laughing, and kind of like pretend taunting each other. And this drunken banter continues from about 1:15 a.m. to about 1:28 a.m. when Warriena tells Gable not to be a dick to her. And in response, he tells her he doesn't want to muscle her and for her to just relax and come have another drink. But she replies with, "Have a good night," seemingly implying that she's ready to leave. And it seems that at first Gable is being kind, asking if she wants him to walk her back home. There's ruffling around, like maybe she's gathering up her things and looking for her phone. And then she tells him good night. But Gable says no, that he'll take her home in the morning, like he wants her to stay overnight. Then the music that was playing suddenly stops. It's at 1:35 a.m. when things take a much darker turn. Warriena declares that she wants to leave, but she can't find her phone. And she's accusing Gable of taking it. And Gable asks, "Do you want me to ring it?" And she says, "Yes, I would love for you to effing ring it."
Where's my
Like what?
all my data? Where's all my
What does it look
data?
like? Is it in there? Or?
It looks like iPhone.
Do you want me to ring it?
Yeah, I'd love you to ring it.
What's the number? I'll find it.
Yeah.
It's at this point that Warriena tells Gable she's going to call the police, still asking this man to hand over her phone so she can leave, but apparently he won't. And for the 3rd time, she says that she's going to call the police. Gable asks how she can do that if she doesn't have her phone.
Give me. Give me.
I should never.
I'm calling the police.
Okay, do
I'm
it.
gonna the police.
It's
Give
right
it for
there.
me. No, I'm gonna call the police. Get it for
Alright,
me.
you do that.
Get it for me.
It's right there.
No, get it for me.
What are you after?
Okay, I'm gonna call the police, and they're gonna come here. Yeah? You wanna be alright with the police coming here?
Yeah, because
Okay, good. I'm gonna call the police.
what are you looking for?
Good. I'm gonna call the police. Like, where's my money?
Call them with what? I thought you lost your phone.
Exactly.
So how are you gonna call anyone without your
You
phone?
stole my phone.
I didn't touch your goddamn phone.
You guys stole my
I should
So that's why
never.
I'm calling them.
Should have never given you so much to drink.
And then he tells her it must be dead, or maybe it's out on the balcony. It seems like she's becoming increasingly frustrated, and she makes the remark that she's always being taken advantage of when she's back in New Zealand. She's intoxicated and frustrated, and she wants out of his place, but she doesn't want to leave without her device, which is completely reasonable. She tells Gable, quote, "I'm gone. I'll be out of your hair. See you later," end quote. To which he calls her a drama queen.
I must be out of battery. What's this? Oh, that's mine. Must be on the balcony.
It sucks because people take advantage of me in New Zealand. I'll be gone. I'll be here. See you later. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm gone.
Such a drama queen.
He again asked her if she would spend the night and if she wants something to eat. And then oddly, they go back to talking about Greek mythology. I know this is random, but remember, they are heavily intoxicated. At this point, Warriena asks him if she can go out toward the window and maybe have a look out because he has this tiny telescope. It's like a handheld telescope. But Gable eerily makes the statement, "Don't jump off or anything." And then he adds something about people in white coats that are going to come in if she would jump off the balcony. And I'm confused about what he was trying to imply. In my mind, I thought that maybe he was referencing psychologists in white coats were going to come get her because she would jump. It's odd considering what's to come.
I want to go have a look out the window, right?
Don't jump off or anything.
No, of course. No, I'm not.
I'm gonna get a knock on the doors and people with white coats are gonna walk in. Alright, you gotta come with us now.
No, I'll jump off the balcony with my...
No, it's alright.
My mates with all...
I'm totally flattered that my vodka has done this to you.
Then you can hear what sounds like Warriena going to use the bathroom. When she returns, she calls him a social demon, and he replies asking if she got all the photos that he sent from when they took them on the balcony. And then he tells her he needs another drink so he can catch up to her level of intoxication. Then the conversation gets random again. Then they start talking about genitalia and sizes, and Gable tells her that no one is bigger than him and asks her if he's the biggest she's ever had. But apparently Warriena is not impressed. And then there's the sound of a drink being poured and Warriena saying cheers. This is now 2:05 in the morning. It's really unclear what transpired from then until just 5 minutes later at 2:10 a.m. when Warriena is heard on the recording saying, "That really hurt my vagina." Gable can be heard laughing at her comment. There are small noises in the background which appear to be Warriena playing with those stones again on the table. And at one point, Gable says, "Ow," because apparently she threw one at him. These are so small. It's pure speculation of what exactly was happening. And I don't know what Gable did to her to make her say that her private part hurt. But then 2 minutes later, we actually have this audio. I am still going to be coming on to tell you what was said. I know some people are like, why are you repeating it? Understandable, but not everyone can make it out. So I will let you hear it, and then I will tell you.
You're a social demon.
What's that?
Media demon.
Did you get those photos I sent you? On the balcony.
So non-social shit though.
I like it. Our photos. Huh? What? Nothing. You're so much drunker than me. I need to catch up. Oh, that's like vodka on the rocks now. What's yours?
Nobody believes me. I guess nothing would happen then. The UK guys are awesome. Oh, they have funny humor and they have bigger dicks.
Not than me. What about mine?
This. No, it's not working.
What about mine? Is mine not the biggest? Oh, mix that with.
Cheese. Cheese.
Jizz.
Chaz.
Yellow drink?
So what is this? Why are I They really hurt my vagina. You sound like a duck.
I bet you are. No, don't. Alright, I give up. What do you want? What do I have to do? Oh!
Warriena calls Gable Sam Winchester, and Gable replies that he'll do whatever she wants, specifically stating, sexually, "I will be your slave." However, this comment doesn't really come off endearing. Instead, after this, it sounds like there is a struggle At first, it sounds like they're playing around, and I don't know what that metal sounding item is. Maybe it is the telescope rolling on the glass table, but there is so much huffing and puffing. And Gable finally says, all right, that's enough. And it's as though he's grabbing onto her and she's struggling and grunting while trying to get out of his grasp. But as she is fighting him, he keeps saying, that's enough, almost like he wants her to submit and stop struggling. Then Gable tells her, you've worn out your welcome. You're not my kind of girl. And Warriena can be heard whimpering in the background of this recording.
I'll do what you want.
Manchester.
Sexually, I'll be your slave.
Manchester!
Who?
Digger!
Alright, that's enough.
No, that's not. Hazelnut.
I don't care, that's enough.
No! It's fucking.
No, that's enough. That is more than enough.
No! This is.
You want it, you're welcome. You're not my kind of girl.
Look.
That's enough. Right.
Again, we can only speculate without video evidence what they were doing at this point, but it's almost like a switch had gone off. Gable's tone changes from playful and seductive to menacing. And he says to her, you have to leave. But it's as though she's been trying to leave for a while. Yet there are two very intoxicated people, and it seems like one is overpowering the other, and that's Gable. Warriena is breathing heavily, like his weight is on top of her. Warriena replies, okay. And the phone picks up the sound of her gasping for breath again and again. And she's trying to say, like, it's all good. It's all good. And it's unclear what position they're in at this stage. But her voice is clearly muffled, either by Gable's hand over her mouth or by her position. She could be on the floor with him on top of her, and her face could be against the carpet, or maybe even against the couch.
You have to leave.
Okay. It's so good. He knows. He's so good.
I need a nice girl.
He's so good.
Fucking
It's not
insane.
about how you need.
You're
It's
fucking,
not about how.
Yeah, it is. You're fucking insane.
It's not about how you need. It's about how you give a shit now.
It's hard to make out at this point what this poor girl is trying to say, but he tells her that he's going to need a DNA sample, which I think is very odd. Gable then calls her f***ing insane, and in a line which has become synonymous with this case, he then says, quote, you're lucky I haven't chucked you off my balcony, you goddamn little psycho bitch. Who the F do you think I am? End quote. He keeps taunting her, and she's gasping in the background. And he continues going, what? What? You got something to say? Just taunting her again and again. And this woman is clearly subdued. She is struggling to respond, but finally gets out the word, yeah. Her next words are even more muffled, but they can be made out. She says, you're a sexist. And as she's struggling to breathe, Gable says, I'm the one that's injured. You don't have a goddamn scratch on you. And then she mumbles, seriously, let go. And Gabe says, seriously, what? And you can't really make out what she's trying to say. But he responds that he's sick of this. And he calls her a goddamn psycho before telling her that he's going to let her go. And he's going to walk her out of his apartment, but just the way she is. Meaning, however she looks, however she's dressed, or whatever condition she's in at that very moment. And he continues with, you're not collecting any belongings or anything. You're just going to walk out, and I'm going to slam the door on you. You understand? And if you try to pull anything, I'll knock you out. I will knock you the F out. Do you understand? And that is definitely not the way to speak to anyone, especially a female, as he's threatening physical violence. I can vaguely hear her trying to say, I'm sorry, and for the next couple minutes, the recording captures the sounds of scuffling and gurgling and more gasps while Warriena struggles to breathe.
I do need a sample of DNA. See, I thought you were kidding, and I've taken enough. This is bullshit. You're lucky I haven't chucked you off my fucking balcony, you goddamn psycho little. Who the f do you think I am? Yeah, do your Muay Thai now. What? What? Got something to say? Say it.
Yeah.
Say it. What?
She's a sexist.
Yeah, right. I'm the one who's injured. You don't have a goddamn scratch on you.
Seriously. I do.
Seriously, what? Seriously, what? Seriously, what? I thought you were just playing around. I'm f***ing sick of this shit. Goddamn psycho. I'm gonna let you go. I'm gonna walk you out of this apartment. Just the way you are. You're not gonna collect any belongings or anything, you're just gonna walk out. And I'm gonna slam the door on you. You understand? If you try to pull anything, I'll knock you out. I'll knock you the f*** out. Do you understand? Do you understand? Do you understand? Come on, get up. Get up. Get up. Get up. Get up.
He keeps saying she doesn't understand. And she's almost choking in this part of the recording. It's hard for me to listen to this. And it goes on for a little while. And then Gable yells at Warriena to let go of something, but apparently she won't. And honestly, she's probably grabbed something to try to protect herself at this point. And there's a lot more aggressive wrestling around. And then there's the sound of metal hitting maybe that glass table. And Warriena starts to scream. At 2:19 a.m., a door can be heard unlocking. And Warriena starts screaming, no. She repeats that cry 31 times in the next 46 seconds. Remember that. She says no 31 times. I'm going to play it for you. I can hardly stand to listen to it. And these are not simple demands to stop. These are desperate, primal pleas for safety. Her fear is palpable in every word. And with each no, it's louder and more frantic than the last. She's literally screaming for her life. And all Gable says during this time is shut your f***ing mouth. This is all on recording, you know. It's all being recorded. And I could hear her say, just let me go home. And she repeats that a number of times. But Gable responds with, I would, but you've been a bad girl. Then the door can be heard locking again. And Warriena's screams are more muffled because Gable has just locked her outside on his small balcony. A decision which becomes a death sentence.
You don't understand, do you? You don't understand anything at all, do you? You don't understand. You don't understand, do you? You just don't understand. Let go. You think you can hit me? and I'll just like fall down, like in the movies? Huh? You don't understand anything, do you? Let go of it. Let go. Let go. Let go. Go. Who the f*** do you think you are?
No!
Hmm?
No! No! No!
You're trying to kill me, huh?
No!
Why'd you try to hit me with that?
No!
Huh?
No! 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 No!
Fucking mouth.
No!
It's all on recording, you know? It's all being recorded. I would, but you've been a bad girl.
2 floors below Gable's apartment, a man named Nick Casey was visiting his friend and colleague Emily Ellis. They're both hairstylists, and Emily's boyfriend Ryan Martin was also there. They heard desperate screams coming from outside, so they rushed to their balcony, expecting to see someone on maybe the balcony above them. But Warriena was 2 floors up and out of their reach. They noticed that she was standing on the small ledge, but on the wrong side of the glass banister. She's on the outside of the balcony. It's clear that she's either climbed over the railing to try to escape or has been forced over the side. They call out to Warriena, and she's sobbing, and she's telling them she just wants to go home. And Nick tells her something along the lines of, "You cannot get down this way, go back in." And they begged her to climb back over onto the balcony and that they would come to help her. And at first it looks like she's going to, but her leg twists and she couldn't get it in the right position. And then seconds later, her body goes stiff and she slips. And Nick and his friends watch helplessly as she falls past them. As she passed their balcony, they could see her eyes were filled with fear. This tragic moment is etched into their memories, and the horror of it has not lessened in the years which have already passed. 25 seconds after the door lock can be heard closing, Gable's phone records a scream as Warriena fell 14 floors to her death. And he can be heard just breathing deeply. And then he makes a call. But it wasn't to the police or emergency services. It was to his lawyer. By then, it was 2:21 a.m., and the lawyer doesn't answer the call.
Hi, the person you have called is not available. Please leave a short 10-second message after the tone and we'll send the message as a text.
And then 5 minutes later, he's caught on the CCTV footage, catching the elevator down to the ground floor of the apartment building, and he's holding something silver in his hands. Then he's captured exiting the Avalon Apartments. When he notices the emergency services who have been called by the residents of the apartment directly below Gable, he turned around and goes back inside. Then he snuck around the back entrance of this building where he used a fire escape to exit through the underground parking lot. This is not the action of an innocent person. You would not do this if you were innocent. For the next 43 minutes, Gable walked around the deserted strip, and at one point, he gets his phone out and he calls Warriena's phone. Of course, there's no answer, but he calls it again. And you know where it is? Her phone is in his pocket. Remember how she kept demanding him to give her phone back and he denied having it? He had it all along.
You know how I said there was something in my pocket? It was her phone in my pocket.
At 3:10 in the morning, Gable callously orders a slice of pizza from Domino's and then sits on a public bench just watching as emergency services are swarming the pavement outside this apartment building. And he knows why they're there, because there's a dead woman lying on the concrete. But he doesn't help. When he finishes pizza, he made another call. And once again, not to emergency services or the police to explain what happened, but to his dad. His phone was still recording audio. So we have this call recorded. I'm going to let you hear it now.
Hello, Dad. I might have a bit of a situation. See, I met up with a girl for a date tonight, and she started getting really aggressive. Like, it was alright at first, and like we, you know, had sex in bed, and then after that, like, she kept drinking, and we were both drinking, and she, like, I think she thought it was like a joke or something, but she kept like beating me up and whatever. Yeah, and it was because she was really drunk, and like I forced her out on the balcony, and I think she might have jumped off. Like, I've been walking around and there are like a million cops around my building. I don't know what to do. I didn't cause this. Like, I didn't push her or anything. I'm like just walking around the area, and there's like a million cops around the area. It's really f***ed up. I'm like next to Domino's. So like I didn't. This isn't my fault. I didn't do this. I was giving her my alcohol, but she was really violent, and I like tackled her on my floor inside the building, and then but I never forced her over the balcony. God no, I'd never do anything like that. It's really f***ed up. I don't know what to do. Like, I'm just I'm walking around the area, and I just see a million cops around Avalon. I'm outside Domino's. Dad, this is really f***ed up. Why does this keep happening to me? Like, I'm just like outside Amcal and Harcourts. Do you know where that is? I kind of like walked past the building a few times, and there's a million cops out there. I don't know what the f*** happened. It's crazy. This is f***ed up. This is so f***ed up. I swear to God, I didn't push her or anything. I just chucked her out on the balcony and shut the door because she was beating me up. I'm like opposite Melba's. I'm wearing like an aqua-coloured long t-shirt, long shirt. Alright, well, are you getting in the car now? Or why do I get into trouble that I don't ask for? It's ridiculous. It wasn't my fault. What happened was we were just drinking and we got into bed together, and then, you know, after that she just kept drinking and she just kept like, I don't know, she just kept like kind of beating me up. She thought it was funny or something. And then I was just like, you know, tackled her in the middle of my apartment, and I said it's not funny anymore and blah blah blah. And then when I let her go, like, last thing I remember was she just was on the balcony, and I don't know if she jumped or what. I don't know. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't my damn fault. Where are you gonna meet me? There's still a million cops outside my place.
I think it's interesting when he says, why does this keep happening to me? Why do all of these things keep happening to him? Why do you think these things keep happening to him? Unsurprisingly, Gable's dad believes his son's version of events, and he tells him to stay on the line while he drives over there to go pick him up from outside the pizza place. And he drives him back to their family's gated community on the Gold Coast. Still, they have not told any authorities that it was Gable who'd been serving the small woman an excessive amount of alcohol and who was keeping her captive in his apartment, holding her down and holding her phone hostage as she begged to leave, and then begged her not to throw her out on the balcony. Why put her out there? Why not just put her out the front door? If you really were trying to allow her to leave, why? And why would you even make that remark that you should have already thrown her over? While Gable got into a nice safe bed that night, emergency services were struggling to identify the woman that they had found outside on the sidewalk below his building. It is gut-wrenching. She had sustained horrific injuries. She was completely unrecognizable, even if they had known who she was. They found no wallet, no phone, and no ID in the pocket of her jeans. When the crime scene investigation was completed, Warriena's body was removed for an autopsy. She was found to have more than 80 separate injuries. The pathologist stated that her body had folded over itself, that her head was bent over her torso, and fragments of her jeans were found embedded into her skull fractures. It makes me sick to think about that she's someone's daughter, someone's sister and friend, and it was so preventable. And going back to this autopsy, the only fluid that the pathologist could test was in her eye, because the blood in her chest cavity was contaminated by the impact of her falling 14 stories. The fluid from her eye was found to have a blood alcohol level that was 3 times the legal limit for driving. We know that she's only about 5'2" and 125 pounds, but the pathologist couldn't even determine her height because of the significant trauma to her body. At that point, when they were examining her, they did find some older-looking scars that looked like they could have been self-inflicted on her wrists and her thighs and her chest. We'll get to that later. Meanwhile, officers were still attempting to identify her. They spoke to residents in the apartment who had called the emergency services to begin with, and they identified the 14th floor as the balcony that she had fallen from. They were able to gain access to Gable's apartment, and it was empty, and there was no sign of its owner. However, there were personal items belonging to Warriena, like her purse, that was found, which led them to her identity. That afternoon, Gable handed himself in to the police, accompanied by his lawyer. And under the advice of his counsel, he refused to provide a statement about what had happened that night, but they did take away his cell phone. Only 3 days after Warriena died, Gable was back posting on the bodybuilding forum. He wrote this at 10:21 a.m., quote, "I've been advised not to go into details, but all I will say is that I absolutely did not cause this girl to fall, and that I'm devastated about what happened to her," end quote. But then, just a little while later at 11:18 a.m., he posted again saying, quote, "Fact is, I've taken home probably 150 girls from clubs over the last few years. When you go out often to the same places and get drunk and talk to girls, you're bound to get noticed and hated on, and people gossip. Eventually, it turns into Chinese whispers, which were his words, by the way, where people have a completely false impression of you. Most people who know me have been completely supportive. It's those who don't know me at all who assume the worst, end quote. He could not stop posting because 13 minutes later, at 11:31, he adds this, quote, "My reputation has already been destroyed without me saying anything at all. It's nothing I haven't already posted in this thread, but that's all I have to say for now," end quote. While Gable defended himself online, officers continued their investigation into Warriena's death. There were some pictures taken of his apartment that I want to show you. This is his living room and dining area with the kitchen, just one space. Told you it was kind of modest and small. Here's the couch. Here are those white rocks that she was apparently throwing at him that instigated him or hurt him or upset him. They're tiny rocks. There are items on the floor. This is her purse that she took with her. Looks like maybe the telescope is on the table. And there are other items just kind of strewn around. In his bedroom, the bed is unmade. The sheets are kind of balled up. There's that same pillow I showed you from before. And this right here is what the balcony looked like. There was a pair of his shoes that were outside. You can see the tanning bed, and that's about it. Now, the officers and the investigators spoke to the woman who lived in the apartment directly below Gable's. And you know what she said? She told them that 2 months earlier, she heard another female yelling no the exact same way. That's interesting, and I am not surprised. 4 days after Warriena died, Gable was charged with her murder and remanded into custody. And 3 months later, he was granted bail with strict conditions that he was not allowed to consume alcohol, he wasn't allowed to go on social media or go on his favorite app, Tinder. But there was no restriction on him for posting on the place where he had his online presence where everything began, the bodybuilding forum. Now, I want to let you know that an investigation had been going on this whole time. They had done an extensive search of his apartment. They had gone and kind of recreated what it would have been like if Warriena had tried to make her way over the balcony. There was an officer who actually hung from the balcony above to show how far it was, because we will get to this, but they wanted to know if it was possible for someone to escape his balcony and get down to the next one. Perhaps if they weren't under the influence, but it is very dangerous. But here are police kind of looking into all of that. But back to the post in the bodybuilding forum, Gable had a post titled, quote, "Regarding the balcony tragedy," end quote. And he gave his perspective on all the events that transpired. And he also explains away every piece of evidence that might be against him. Now, his post is over 2,000 words. If I were to read it word for word, it would take me a while. But on the other hand, I find this to be one of the most important parts of this case. It's his version of events, but I'm also going to be putting it on the screen so you can follow along. But I'm only going to highlight the parts that I feel are the most important. So I'm not going to be reading this verbatim. He starts out by saying that he thinks it's time he spoke out about the events that have happened over the last few months. He calls it a tragic death of Warriena Wright. He goes on to explain that he feels the fact that he was silent has tied his hands, and there's been so many misconceptions and untruths spread in the media and in the public. So he's attempting to set the record straight. He goes on to express how difficult it's been for him. And I'm not surprised he'd play the victim here. He said that Warriena's death was the most tragic and distressing event he's ever experienced. I think his choice of the word experienced is interesting. What about that he was a part of, that he influenced, that he instigated? Those would be more accurate words from what I read, saw, and heard throughout my own research. In his version of how it's made him feel, he explained that knowing that he was the last person to have seen her alive has permanently scarred him, and how he wishes he could go back in time and prevent it. That for at least a week, those were his words, a week, after what happened, he's been so overwhelmed that he's not able to smile or laugh. Woe is him. This woman's dead. She won't ever laugh or smile ever again. And I wondered if he even realized how ignorant all of that sounded. But he tried to even empathize with Warriena's family by saying that even though he hasn't had a chance to speak with them yet, it pains him to think about the loss and suffering they must be going through. And he goes into blaming the media for the way that things have been handled, saying that they have no respect or dignity for the people involved. And of course, he's including himself in that regard, saying that the media only cares about a story and they need a villain for their story. So they picked him. Well, that's pretty inaccurate, but he calls the reports misleading and exploiting him, that the media made him to be an evil monster, which he says couldn't be further from the truth. But even from some of the things that we have read that he wrote with his own words in those forums before Warriena died, I think it speaks for itself. Not to mention the way he would speak and treat and act towards women, and even toward Warriena on his own recording. But now for his versions of the events of that night. He says it started out relaxed and fun. They matched on Tinder. They decided to meet for drinks while she was on vacation. And at first, they got along great. But as the night continued, her behavior became strange and increasingly aggressive. He said he didn't know if she found it amusing, but he thought she was out of hand. He skips over the fact that he wasn't giving her phone back and pumping her with more and more moonshine, and that he bought and supplied all the alcohol that night. But he makes it out as though Warriena started to hit him and taunt him out of nowhere. He goes on to say that she began throwing his things around and trashing his apartment, which I find extreme. We saw the pictures of his apartment. He hardly had anything in his apartment to be trashed, and we heard what went on. Actually, one of the first complaints came from Warriena herself, not him. It was her saying she wanted to leave, but she didn't want to leave without her phone. She wanted it back. They had already been bantering a bit before she told him that something that happened had really hurt her vagina. And Gable can be heard laughing at her. Remember that? But in his version, it was just this psycho girl trashing his apartment and trying to beat him up. This man is much larger than her. I hardly doubt that's as accurate as it really was. And remember, there was a time before things took a turn where this man was still trying to get her to go back into his bed again. Remember, he says that he'll do anything she wants and become her sex slave. But that's when it seems like it caused friction between them. It's like she rejected that advance because that's when things got worse, and we know that he doesn't like to be told no. And that's when there's the sound of a struggle. And he says, all right, that's enough. You've worn out your welcome. She had already asked him to leave, but wanted her phone. He could have easily helped her into a taxi or an Uber or whatever, but he did no such thing. But in his post, he claims that the next 2 hours was him trying to placate her and calm her down. Really? So we didn't hear him basically covering her mouth with his hand or pushing her face into the carpet or making it hard for her to breathe because she was gasping for breath. That's calming her down. Oh, and in his version, it was him that wanted her to leave from the start. He makes it out like he's some kind of lovely host, saying he's always happy to have girls come over to his apartment and stay the night. But her behavior became overbearing, and he decided he wanted her to leave. Well, why not just give this girl her belongings and walk her down? When he does finally tell her he wants her out, Warriena replies okay, but instead of just leading the way like a gentleman and walking her out of his apartment, you hear the sound of her gasping even more. Well, he claims that she tried to swing something at him, and that's what that sound of the alleged choking was, really. He said he never deliberately tried to choke her with his hands around her neck, but he was merely trying to take the weapon from her. But what he does add is that if he wanted to choke her out, it probably wouldn't have been that hard. Really? Okay, Captain Obvious, you're much bigger than her. You're much stronger than her. Of course it would have been easy to subdue her. You were. But he claims he never wanted to hurt her. And he even sings his own praises by adding, quote, a less forgiving man could have quite conceivably exercised less restraint and retaliated violently, end quote. Retaliated. She's a young woman who wants to leave your apartment. Her phone is being held captive. She's scared. Why not call for help if you really thought she was trying to hurt you? Why not call the police or security guard? Instead, we hear her voice becoming more and more muffled until we hear him say those all too telling words that she's lucky he hasn't chucked her off his balcony. All the while, this poor girl can be heard gasping in the background. And remember when he called her a bad girl and that's why he wouldn't let her leave? He attempts to explain this away in his post by saying that he was just drunk and he's not that eloquent and he's not good with his words and it was the heat of the moment, so he called her names because he was so frustrated that she wouldn't leave. So remember when I wondered why not just take her to the front door? Well, he had an explanation for that. He was doing the math, so to speak. He said that this struggle they were going through was around 2 to 3 meters from his balcony door, so that's approximately 6 to 9 feet away. That's not exactly close, so I'm a little confused about this next part, but he explains that his front door is apparently like 1 meter further than they were to the balcony, and then his front door has this automatic closer and lock, which he would have to flick and then hold the door open, trying to force this girl out. But why do I tend to believe that had he just opened his front door, she would have willingly left if he would have at least given her phone back and she wasn't being smothered? But he claims that leading her out the front door wasn't an option because of how difficult it would have been. We're talking about a tiny girl. Again, I'm saying it over and over again. He admitted it wouldn't be that hard to hold her down, but it's difficult to just get her out the front door. Instead, he put her on the balcony, which he said was better because he could keep an eye on her through the glass until she calmed down, or he could call security or the police. But I'm still confused. Why is he trapping her like an animal inside of a cage instead of just releasing her to the hallway? This girl was screaming for her life 31 times, but he doesn't care. But he tells everyone in this post that never in his wildest imagination did he expect that after closing that door and turning around for 10 seconds, that she would jump over the railing and disappear. He claims she never tried to get back inside the apartment. Well, if there's a monster on the other side of those doors, it would be pretty hard to feel like that was a good option. At 2:19, you can hear that door lock, and by 2:21, Gable's already on the phone with his lawyer seconds after the muffled scream is caught on the recording. The men below said she did attempt to get back on the other side, but she slipped. But according to Gable, he could not have predicted that within minutes of her being put outside, she fell off the balcony. He said, quote, "It's not as if I locked her there and left her for hours," end quote. No, but you caused her to be so fearful that she felt trapped with no way out. The last thing she cried to the people below her is that she just wanted to go home. That's all she wanted. It's just like those girls that Gable mentioned in the forum that just wanted to leave, and he would get aggressive trying to sleep with them. He wasn't having it. If you come over, he expects to get his way. And why call your lawyer seconds after her scream and not attempt to help? He was the closest person to her. But he says, quote, "I quickly realized that it would be extremely foolish for me to go back out on the balcony in case she had indeed fallen and someone saw me standing near the edge. The only sensible thing I could think to do at the time was call my lawyer, who would know what to do. Of course, the call didn't go through," end quote. So he didn't want to appear to have anything to do with her death. That's how I interpret that statement. He wanted to cover his own butt. He also claimed he never fled. He just went down there to see what happened. And that's when he saw all the police lights and he was terrified, exhausted, intoxicated, and disoriented. But watch the video and hear the way he speaks. He doesn't seem to be as intoxicated as Warriena. He seems to be walking just fine. He's not even stumbling. He seems very calculated. But I want to point something else out. He wasn't dead. Yet he knew she probably was. And instead of offering any help whatsoever, he said that he knew if he walked over to the police that he would be held under suspicion without legal representation. And he added that that's a situation that nobody wants to be in. So he resorted to leaving the building and calling his dad. Resorted. It's another very interesting choice of a word. Resorted is like he had no other choice. He also tells the readers it's easy for them to imagine what they might have done in the situation, but it's impossible for them to know how they would react. But I beg to differ, because most kind, caring, patient, and genuinely nice people, man or woman, would not have treated another human being the way he's admitted to in the past, unrelated to the situation, but certainly not the way he acted towards Warriena either. I think we can all state with certainty we wouldn't have chosen a lot of things that he did. He even tried to explain away him eating that slice of pizza. He made it all about him, about how anxious and hungry and intoxicated he was. It's all he could find when he waited for dear old daddy to come rescue him. It's really all about pity on him, and he overlooks the real victim here. But maybe some of you have different perspectives, and that's good, because I'm always open to them. Because like I stated in the beginning, this is a case that has a lot of people torn. I expect there to be a lot of back and forth feelings. Even I have them. Still, there's a lot about Gable that just doesn't sit right with me. He wasn't done. He went on to talk about how everything has been grossly misrepresented and that the media has vilified him to the point that his character and image has been destroyed beyond repair. But that's all he seemed to ever care about. From the moment he came on that forum was his image. He ends with saying that he's innocent and that any level-headed person can look at all the facts objectively and see that. But the media had definitely come out with their own facts that they obtained from women who had gone on dates with him in the past, from club owners, from people in the community who witnessed his harassment, and people that lived nearby. There were plenty of reports that he used his telescope and even a drone to spy on women down below his apartment like an animal looking for prey. But he addressed those claims. He said he never preyed on drunk girls. He used his telescope and his drone for simple leisure purposes. But we know this man only has one hobby: sleeping with women. So was it really that far off? Oh, and after his phone was confiscated, he got a new one right away, one night after Warriena died, and he was back on Tinder. And people saw that, but he claimed he was only there to deactivate his account, not to look for another girl to sleep with. And he was so childish in this next statement. He said, "I didn't even go out to socialize even once in the week following Warriena's death." Like that means something. He wants praise, like, "Oh, Gable, we're so impressed you can stay inside for a week after such a horrible tragedy has happened to you." He even tried to explain away his prior run-ins with the law, calling them minor. And he ends by saying that he's currently staying with his parents until he's settled and that he has a long road ahead of him. And he knows he's innocent and he will fight these charges. So what do you make of all that? I know it was a lot, but what do you think? Gable wasn't allowed on social media or Tinder due to his bail conditions, but there was nothing stopping him from enjoying the privileged lifestyle that he was raised in. He would share pictures on the bodybuilding forum of himself smiling while enjoying rounds of golf at a members-only course in the Gold Coast and relaxing by the water in his gated community. Not long after Gable was granted bail on the murder charges, he appeared in court in relation to the driving incident. Remember that? The one that happened at Splendor in the Grass. He was jailed for 6 months. From his cell in jail, he would send handwritten notes about that experience. He shared that he drank so much to drown his feelings, and he even sent a note apologizing to the police for his dangerous driving that night when he was clocked going 121 miles per hour. Remember that? But his words really hold no power when his actions speak so much louder. But I want to jump to the trial. It's very interesting, and I want to tell you the outcome, and I want to get your thoughts. 2 years passed before Gable's murder trial got underway. He appeared in court looking very different from the person in his pictures on the bodybuilding forum and his Facebook photos from before Warriena's death. He gained a considerable amount of weight, and he replaced his signature low-cut shirts with a suit. And of course, I'm sure this was on the advice of counsel. But after opening statements, the prosecution set forth their case, and the prosecution is called the Crown over there. And their primary argument was that even though Gable was inside the apartment when Warriena went over the balcony, he had directly contributed to her fateful choice to attempt to escape by climbing over the railing. He didn't need to be outside forcing her over the balcony physically, because the mental torment he put her through had done it for him. In their perspective, she was in fear for her life, and she felt the only option that she had to get away from him was to climb over the balcony and attempt to get to the apartment below. And that way she could call for help and get far away as she could. The Crown explained that the drinking, the threats, the violence, and the locking her outside, all of that had made her feel so unsafe and trapped that she saw no other choice but to climb over that railing to get away, and that Gable provoked her death, which makes him culpable. They argued that the sound of Warriena gasping for air and her muffled voice proves that Gable had strangled her at least once in the minutes before he locked her outside. He had threatened not to let her leave the apartment, and even though she tried to stop him from putting her out on that balcony in the first place, she was desperately trying to get away from him. He wouldn't stop. In other words, this man had intimidated her into resorting to what she believed was the lesser evil, the balcony, and it ended in her death. The premise of this argument is actually not unfounded. There was a case in Australia in 1986 where a woman fell from a 6th floor window to her death because she was trying to get away from her abusive partner. He claimed that she killed herself after an argument, and he was just trying to help. However, the position of her body and prior injuries, as well as evidence of a fight inside their apartment, demonstrated that she had gone out that window to escape his violence. And ultimately, that man was found guilty of her murder. John and I covered another case from Australia where a woman named Lisa Harnham was tormented by her husband for years. And he too isolated her, trapped her, and she chose the same fate, to run out the balcony of their high-rise. Her last moments were recorded on an outdoor camera of their apartment, and she ended up plummeting to her death. But that case was much more complicated from the one I mentioned in 1986 and from the one we're examining here with Gable and Warriena. But just like the perpetrator in 1986 case, when he blamed the woman for her choice to go out the window, Gable's defense lawyers blamed the whole circumstances of her death on the victim. And there's a lot of victim blaming in this case that I've seen online too. It was Warriena's choice to drink, her choice to get agitated, throw things at Gable, and ultimately her choice to climb over that balcony. And they argued that Gable had no other choice but to lock her on the balcony to protect himself from her. But I think we know he had many other choices. His defense asserted that Gable never put his hands on Warriena except in self-defense. He also never strangled her or put his hands around her neck. They argued that there's no evidence to support that, but the pathologist confirmed that strangulation doesn't always leave a mark. And we know that because of the condition of her body, sadly, there was no way to even gauge that. In the defense's point of view, the recording proved that Gable didn't threaten or intimidate Warriena. They said it was quite the opposite. He had acted with reasonable force to de-escalate the situation, and he couldn't have foreseen that she would climb over that railing. They went on to say the only reasonable explanation for her trying to escape was if someone was chasing her with a knife, which they say hadn't happened. In their view, Warriena's actions were utterly irrational. But how do they know that he wasn't chasing her or wasn't using a weapon to intimidate her? We don't have evidence of that either. And you can threaten someone without a weapon. Just your size and actions can be threatening. The jury was comprised of 6 men and 7 women who listened to that full 199 minutes of audio, including that infamous line about him throwing her over the balcony. And the defense lawyers also called Warriena's mental health into question. Remember, I talked about those scars that the pathologist found on her arms and other parts of her body? Well, the defense claimed that they were proof that she had cut herself in the past and self-inflicted these wounds, and that she was unstable and had willingly thrown herself off the balcony as an act of a mentally unwell person rather than someone in fear for their life. That's pretty harsh. The evidence phase of this trial took 6 days, and when it came time for deliberations, they ended up lasting almost as long as this trial itself. During that period, the jury asked the judge several questions, mostly relating to what constituted a disorderly person and whether putting someone on a balcony counted as removing them from their property. On the second day of deliberations, the jury said they were not able to deliver a verdict because some of the jurors couldn't be swayed from their opinion. the judge ordered that they continue to try to reach a unanimous verdict. Finally, after 4 days and 7 additional questions, the jury announced they had finally reached a consensus and were ready to return their verdict. I wonder what you would have chosen. I usually say that the jury has way more evidence than we will ever have, and ultimately it's their job to determine guilt or innocence. They decided that Gable was not guilty of murder and not guilty of manslaughter. He was acquitted on all charges. What are your initial thoughts on this? The reactions around the courtroom were varied. Gable's mother cried out in relief while Warriena's mother had a tissue and she put it towards her eyes as she cried. Gable himself leaned back and clapped his hands and nodded his head, which I thought was very insensitive. As he left that courtroom, the comments from the gallery were divided as well. One person yelled, "We knew you were innocent, mate." Another person shouted that he was a pig. This sentiment was echoed online, with many posts saying that Gable was the victim in all of this. They claimed that Warriena's physical actions amounted to violence and an attack on him, and that Gable should have never been charged in the first place. They asserted that Warriena would have been in danger whether he put her on the balcony or kicked her out of his apartment because she was so unstable. But how so? How is a hallway of an apartment the same as a balcony 14 stories up in the dark, trapped? But I'm open to hearing all of your thoughts and opinions. Other people claimed that the verdict was wrong and argued with the perspective that Warriena was in fear for her life after Gable gave her all of that homemade liquor and attempted to strangle her and not let her leave. Immediately after reading the verdict, the judge announced that he had come extremely close to declaring a mistrial in this case because there was a juror that they found had done things that were considered misconduct. And I found this interesting. I'm not going to go too far into it, but all the jurors had their phones taken away from them for deliberation. However, before that, someone in the jury posted multiple pictures on her Instagram. She would hold a cup of coffee and talk about deciding Gable's fate. In various photos, she shared what it was like to be a juror on a high-profile trial. And she also tagged her location as being at the Supreme Court of Queensland. I'm showing them on the screen, but one of them had a caption that said, "I snagged a nasty one, so it's a bit full on," end quote. When she was asked what case she was on, she replied that it was a murder trial and less than pretty. This post had been viewed several thousand times and shared on social media, and then finally someone in the public reported her to the court. I don't know about Australia, but here in the US, jurors cannot discuss the case, not even with their partners. And if they're asked what case it is, they're not supposed to say. And they're only allowed to talk about it after they're given permission by the judge after the trial is over. Well, of course, the juror was admonished by the judge, but no further action was taken. Despite Gable being acquitted, it's important to know that the jury in this trial were not told about his history with women or all those posts on the bodybuilding forum, or his drinking behaviors, or his other charges, or anything that I shared in this case about Gable's past. His defense lawyers were able to successfully argue that it would have been prejudicial. So remember when I said I usually say jurors know more than we ever will? Well, within the 4 walls of that courtroom, but with all the rules of evidence, it can kind of seem unfair that they aren't privy to things that we know about who this man really was. All they knew about was the actual night of Warriena's death, which begs the question, if they had known more about his history, would they have reached a different verdict? And does his history really have any relevance to the events leading up to Warriena's death? Her family believes it does. Her family traveled to Australia to attend the trial. And listening to your daughter's final moments would have been one of the most difficult things a parent could ever do. But to add insult to injury, the judge ordered that recording of those moments could be released. Warriena's mother complained to the court that the recordings should only have been played in the privacy of the courtroom and not released. She asked for the audio not to be released, but she was overruled. She said, quote, "I did not want to remember her like that. I feel my family has been disrespected by the judge's ruling to release the audio tape to the media. I do not want to hear my daughter screaming, no, 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 no," end quote. After the acquittal, Warriena's family and friends declined to be interviewed, even when people offered to pay them. They just wanted to be left alone in peace. I want to close with the aftermath. After Gable's acquittal, his lawyer claimed he received several inquiries from agents and production companies who wanted to make his story, into a film. And one even suggested that Russell Crowe play Gable himself, which I find laughable. But like Gable said, people wanted a story. But nonetheless, this would be his version because poor Warriena wasn't there to share her side. And he stayed quiet for a while, but not that long, despite never answering any questions from the police or even taking the stand at court. He granted 60 Minutes TV show an exclusive interview. And allegedly, they paid him $250,000. That's insane. And he doesn't even need the money. He also chose to change his name to Eric Thomas, because his previous womanizing persona and could-be killer wouldn't have probably gone over well. But changing his name gave him free rein to return to social media, and he did so with a vengeance. Right after Warriena's death, someone in the public set up a page to discuss whether or not he was guilty of murder. There were 5,000 members, and they probably never expected Gable himself to join in the discussion. But after his acquittal, he did just that. I'm not surprised. I think he likes all the attention. Now, he didn't provide any new information, but instead, he would just call users out for things like spelling and grammar mistakes, and he would go around just mocking people. He asked one female poster, quote, "Do your bitter, angry delusions help you deal with the constant rejection you no doubt experience from men?" End quote. It's clear that Gable's previous thoughts on women's value being only sexual in nature hadn't changed. In other posts, he called women fembots and complained that all they wanted was men's money. He would ask things like, why do so many girls sexually objectify themselves by posting a ton of half-naked pictures and then complain when they get treated like sexual objects? That's like wearing a clown suit and complaining that nobody takes you seriously. Those were his words. He also tried to rejoin Tinder under his new name. His new profile showed him wearing a Make Australia Great Again cap, and another shows him with a lei around his neck. But when Facebook users became aware that he was on Tinder again trying to pick up women under a new name, they posted warnings that women should avoid him. They would use hashtags like "Don't Date Eric" and "Stay Safe." Well, Gable responded to all this by saying that they were defaming him. He was like, "I'm acquitted, and ethically, I should not be obliged to tell people I did anything wrong," because he didn't. In 2017, he even filed a lawsuit against the government in Australia, alleging that he was wrongfully arrested by police in 2014 and that they used excessive force. He already had enough money, like I said, but he was now suing for 300,000 Australian dollars. I wasn't able to find the outcome of this case because I don't have access to Australian documents, but I figured I would mention it. In the years since Warriena's death, Gable hasn't been able to keep himself out of trouble either. On New Year's Eve in 2020, he was removed from a woman's house after she stated that he was making her feel uncomfortable. Just like he and Warriena, the pair met on Tinder, went back to her place where they continued drinking. But then the woman claims that he started talking about Warriena's death, and she asked him to leave, but he wouldn't, so she had to call the police. He wasn't arrested, but he was taken to the local police station where a member of his family picked him up, rescued him again. The following year, an ex-partner of his came forward and said that she received a ton of nasty text and voice messages after she broke up with him. And she went on to post videos to YouTube sharing her experience. If I can find those, I will link them below. I have not watched them, but that is interesting and I would like to hear from her. But don't go looking for them now. Just wait because I have some final thoughts and questions for you as well. In 2022, Gable was back in court. He was 35 at this time and found naked in the driver's seat behind the wheel of a car that had crashed on October 13th. He had now established his new identity as Eric Thomas, so that's how articles are written in the media about this incident. But he was said to be unstable, bloodshot eyes, slurring his speech, and a witness said they saw his car drift over the median, struck a concrete barrier, cut across another car, and then plow into the bushes. He refused to do a breathalyzer or a blood test at the police station. The judge ended up giving him 12 months of probation and I think a charge of like $350. But he was banned from driving. His license was taken away during that time. Despite Gable's acquittal, there are some lingering questions in this case, of course. Like why Warriena screamed no for 46 seconds. 46 seconds might not seem that long, but it is a notable amount of time to be feeling so petrified and to maintain the intensity that she was screaming at. Set your timer and see. Remember, Gable's balcony was quite small, and according to him, he was just on the other side of the glass, so he would have been able to clearly see her and hear her. Several members of the Facebook group that I mentioned earlier also pointed out that when Gable was seen on CCTV cameras exiting the building, he was carrying that silver object in his hand, and it's never been identified. And interestingly, one of the questions that the jurors had was, what was that? But the judge ruled that it was irrelevant. But was it though? What if it was a knife or even a gun? Even with these questions and knowing what we know about Gable's problematic history with women, is there enough evidence to say the jury got it wrong? You tell me. The events of that night, viewed through the lens of his past behavior, the social dynamics, it suggests a man struggling with way deeper issues. Someone that should not be trusted alone with a woman, in my perspective. While the jury made their decision based on the evidence presented, the nuances of things like human psychology and interpersonal relationships suggest a scenario where multiple truths can coexist. And of course, I want to know what you think is the closest to the truth about that night. I think the best way to wrap this up is not to make a final judgment on Gable's character or the jury's decision, but to recognize just how complex it is to figure out guilt and intent and moral responsibility in such a messy situation like this. A situation that could have been prevented. Warriena did not have to die that night, and I am so sorry that she did. I'm so sorry to her family and all of her loved ones. And like always, thank you so very much for watching this series. I hope you stay tuned for my next Evil Minds video or just my next video. Maybe give one of these videos another chance. And also please share this with someone that you think could benefit from knowing the information in this case. I will see you in my next video. Bye.